And we'll start. Hey everyone, I hope you guys are doing super well. Welcome back to the Conscious Breakthrough Lives. Today I'm so excited because I will be with Lauren and we're talking about all things astrology, birth charts, and all about the wounded healer. So super excited. I know a lot of you guys have a lot of questions because you're either a light worker, wanting to be a light worker, or maybe you're feeling called to do deeper shadow work, especially as we go into this season of the end of the year. So I can't wait for Lauren to share all of the interesting tips and knowledge so you can grow throughout your experience. So thanks so much, Lauren, for coming on the live. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited. It's hard to believe we planned this like 3 months ago during the fall equinox, and now we're almost winter solstice. It's hard to believe a whole gone by.
Time goes by so quickly. And I feel like this year especially, it's been just like a quick evolution. And I know you've gone through a lot of changes as well. So, and a lot of people have as well on the channel. So I'm really, really excited for you to talk about your experience, but also share a lot about astrology. But yeah, I would love for you to introduce yourself and just more about how you got brought into the astrology world.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Lauren. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'm originally from Toronto, so I am a Reiki healer, astrologer, and a spiritual life coach. I've been into astrology like at least half of my life. Ever since I was young, I was super into numbers, numerology, constellations, planets. I've always been like super fascinated by that. And I dove into astrology a lot more intensively, I would say, in the last 3.5, 4 years, particularly when I went through something called Saturn return, which is something you go through every 28 to 30 years, where you really go through a lot of quick, accelerated soul lessons in a short time. So that was really what facilitated the process of me getting into this a lot more in depth, because I went through some major, major life transitions a lot at a very like short period of time. And when I started to dive into my personal astrology, it started to make sense why I was experiencing certain lessons, certain wounds were coming up for me, why I didn't feel like my life was aligned in many ways. And the second I started to really dive into that and master that, I was able to really get into more like alignment in my purpose. And essentially my life is just a lot more fluid. I do believe people who do use your astrology as a tool, as again, I will say a tool, because you ultimately do have free will at the end of the day. For those of you who are like tarot readers and stuff, you know, you can provide information, but at the end of the day, people do have free will when it comes to their destiny. So, but I've been able to use it as a tool to really help with my business, my personal life, forecast, again, just know when certain themes are coming up in my life, certain healing patterns. So I'm excited to dive into this more with you guys, because this is totally like what lights me up. I'm honored that Shika asked me to be on this live today. So thank you for having me and everything.
So happy to have you. And also like I think it's awesome that that's basically how our friendship like rekindled, was like the
That's so
whole
true.
aspect of us both going through our shadow work, and like our anniversary of our first year is coming up soon. So I'm super, super excited. But I was going to mention a bit about how, like, for me as a business owner and a healer too, I go based on my period and the moon, and I think it makes such a big difference. So I can really honor my body and my energy. And I think whether you're a healer or just like whoever, any person, I think it makes a big difference when you learn more about just your birth chart and all those things that we're going to talk about today. And when you should either like launch something, or when you should take a break, or when not to, or when to make a big decision. All these things are so important, and they do correlate with our birth charts. So I guess like kind of just starting with like, what is astrology to you? I feel like every person defines astrology differently, but how would you explain it in a nutshell?
So I'm going to try and keep this live very simple terms for you guys, because again, I feel like I will lose many people if I get into like the technicalities, because astrology is very like mathematical and like technical and all the things.
Yeah.
For me, like as I see astrology is really just the universal forces of gravity based on the astral realm, meaning like the planets, the stars, asteroids, all of those things. They all have a different energetic frequency and gravity pull, that we see this ripple effect in like Mother Nature, even like our world, day-to-day events. So even just with this whole pandemic happening this year, there was a lot of things that were forecasted based on astrology. And again, it is very like astral realm, multi-dimensional kind of field. So that's kind of like the simple terms. I don't really like to get too technical with people because I feel like after that, people just get lost. But based on all these various components, so we have different houses, planets, constellations. These really just have different impacts in your day-to-day life, in your soul journey, your purpose work, your healing. So these all play a factor into different areas. And once you really start to understand the purpose of each, you'll understand how these themes kind of come in different periods of your life. So like I said, finished my Saturn return. So I went through specific lessons for like a good 3 years. But again, it's cyclical in nature, depending on you, when you're born, different generations. There's a lot of factors. And now we're going to Saturn in Aquarius. So we're seeing these people go through their Saturn return soon, which will be Shika as well as the nodes shifted as well, meaning these are very collective core themes that will be coming up in the collective for the next couple of years, and areas we're meant to expand and evolve in big, big ways. So this is something we're seeing a lot. So communication being a big one in the next couple of years for us collectively, speaking more of our truth. That is a big thing we'll see on the horizon. But yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked there. So.
No, I love it. Like, I think you like wrapped it such a big topic that someone can like literally do their PhD on in such a great like scope, which is awesome. I guess like for you, like astrology, a lot of people have questions on it, which by the way, guys, if you have questions, let us know in the comment section. Lauren would be more than happy to answer any questions on astrology or any of the things that we're talking about. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you a bit is people always tell me that astrology can be quite overwhelming. So, you know, there is our sun sign and our moon sign. And I always tell people there's more to that than just the sun and the moon. So I guess like coming from knowing your sun and the moon sign, what are some other things that you can dive into to learn more about how you can maneuver through learning more about your astrology?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because I remember when I started to dive into it more, I was just like so overwhelmed. I remember I had a couple of calls with some astrologers and the information literally went right over my head, like just like that. It is a lot to take in because there's so many components and areas to it. So as Shika mentioned, you do have your 3 primary signs, which are known as your sun, your moon, and your rising. So your sun is more of like your personality, your individuality. Your moon is more of like your emotions. And then like your rising sign is kind of what people perceive you at first glance. So myself as an example, I'm a Libra, my moon is Capricorn, and my rising is Cancer. So most people do see me as a Cancer because I have a lot of nurturing qualities about myself, very intuitive, very empathic. But at the end of the day, those 3 signs are really such a small fraction of who you are, which I know for many people that will sound very mind-blowing, but trust me, because I've done certain readings for people where they have like their sun and certain signs, and actually their charts are so much concentrated in other areas that actually doesn't really showcase in who they are. And so when they find out that, just say they're like a Sagittarius, but they only have just their sun in Sagittarius and that's it, and they don't resonate with the properties of being a Sagittarius, that's often why, because you might have other areas where your chart is concentrated. So overall, guys, there's like 12 or so core areas that I really look at when I'm doing like birth chart readings for people. So again, the sun sign, that's like what most people associate as your zodiac sign, which is based on your birthday, like that range of that specific sign. Your moon, which again, like I said, is like your emotions, like how you kind of process emotions. Then we have Mercury, which is all about like communication, how you tend to communicate yourself, how you process things on like a mental level. Venus, which is like one of my favorites because I'm a Libra, but all about like romance, your femininity. Mars, again, is more like the opposite of Venus. So that's like the masculinity, the drive, the action. And then we go into like the signs that are a bit more, I don't want to say complex, but they're based on like a lot more generational factors. Sorry, my cat is.
That's okay.
He's getting excited about the live too.
That's okay.
So then we have Jupiter, which that sign is switching into Aquarius as well in the next week. That's all about like expansion, good fortune, good luck. Then we get into the ones, like I said, that are generational, meaning like several year windows of like generations essentially were born into that specific planet and sign. So Saturn is like what we're kind of seeing this transition with now, which was in Capricorn for many years, which is all about like challenge, restriction, which is why for many people we're experiencing a lot of this in our life this year, particularly. A lot of father wounds tend to come up in this area when you're going through your Saturn return. Then we have Uranus, which is more like expansive, revolutionary, outward thinking, which again, like if we're all within the same age range, many of us will probably have Uranus, and like I have mine in Capricorn. I know Chica's is in Capricorn. So again, this will be like a generational thing, and certain generations are meant to carry out certain lessons in like this lifetime. Then we have Neptune, which is all about like spirituality, illusion. Pluto, which is one that I really look at very intensively, because this is a big one when it comes to wounds, especially. It's very like about transformation, a lot of the subconscious realm, mentally. So that's an area I look at a lot, especially if just say you have someone you met in your life, and I look at that placement a lot because I can see if it's like a past life connection or like ancestral or certain themes that come through in that area. And then other than that, we have the nodes, which I touched on quickly. I'll go into more later, but that's the North Node being like your destiny, meaning like that's like your sole purpose in this lifetime, where you want to strive to be in this present life. Then you have the opposite, which is the South, which is essentially your past life karma. So meaning those were specific lessons you really anchored and learned in the previous life, which for many of us, that's what comes naturally in this lifetime. So if you're just particularly good at something and it seems like a comfort zone, and more or less, that's often something you've mastered in the previous life, which is why it kind of comes by default. And then my favorite, personally, which I know most people will disagree, but like Chiron is an asteroid. So it's not necessarily a planet per se, but this is an area I heavily focus on with a lot of people I work with, because this is what reveals your core wounds in this lifetime. And what people don't understand oftentimes with Chiron is that you are meant to heal specific core wounds in this life as almost like a way to anchor into your purpose work. So whatever lessons you need to go through and learn and wounds you need to heal through in this lifetime is often, like I say, using that pain for power and purpose. So those are two areas I heavily focus on a lot with people, is the nodes, like your soul purpose, and then, like I said, Chiron. But again, we do have to kind of look at the comprehensive view at the end of the day to get like a clear picture of kind of who you are as a person, what things you'll tend to lean on, like in terms of like career and like in your relationships, even like what qualities you'll look for in a partner to balance you out. So that just was like a very brief overview of like some of the major planets and placements you will look at in a birth chart.
I'm really happy you went over that, because like our last one that we had with Courtney, she went over like the basis of it, and I feel like right now you guys can get to deep dive. And again, if you haven't seen that one, you can go check that out, and you can rewatch this too. But it really helps you with like, okay, now that I know my sun, my moon, and my rising, and a bit more about like what the purpose of astrology is for, from a collective standpoint and a personal standpoint, now I can kind of go into those notes like you mentioned. One thing that tends to be a misconception for a lot of people, and it's something that I learned when connecting with you, a lot of people think that the time that you're born, like some people will say, just put 12 p.m. and that's like fine for like the correction of whatnot. But I know you shared that not to do that when you're doing the birth chart calculation. I wanted to say, like, for you to share why that's important, what time you were born on that specific day and year.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked, because unfortunately that is something that's sometimes not easy for people to get in terms of information. Maybe your parents passed over, or maybe you don't have records of your actual birth time. If you're ever wondering of how to go about that, you can often reach out to like the hospital where you're born. They're supposed to keep these records on file. So if you're ever wondering how you can attain that information if you don't know it, you can go that route. But yeah, it's super important, because I'll go in a second about the houses, which are essentially are 12, like the 12 zodiac signs. There's 12 houses, and these really correspond to different themes and areas of your life. And if we don't often know the exact birth time, this can very much alter the whole information of your blueprint. Essentially, we would have the planets that would not change. However, if those specific houses change, that could really change the whole outcome of your birth chart reading. So I know people are like, oh, but really, what could a difference of like an hour or two make? Honestly, guys, it makes a big difference, even if you had the wrong birthday or even geographic location. This is all, again, mathematical. So it's coming down to math and science in a sense. And even it could literally alter a planet. It could alter a sign. It can alter the degrees, which in some cases could be very important because certain degrees also correspond to certain areas you're meant to essentially master. So if you're like a 0 degree or 1 degree, that means in this life, that specific one, you're meant to really make growth in that area because that's an area in previous lives you might not have necessarily mastered. If you have like a 29 degree per se, that's kind of like a finale and a closing. Like you're meant to kind of wrap up lessons in that specific area. So again, it's just super important to have the exact time because I've done readings for people and that's literally changed a lot of the whole reading. And it's just doing you a disservice because we don't want to tell you information that's not accurate, right? So the more detail we have at the end of the day, the more detail we can provide you as well. So
yeah, that's super important. I know Courtney talked a little bit about houses, but I want to talk about the notes because I know you briefly talked about that, but just sharing more about the importance of the notes when we're looking at shadow work and kind of leading us to that healing. Can you kind of share a little bit more about that information of like the importance of it, how to use it, how to maneuver through it, especially considering that a lot of people are doing the inner work this year, especially with how crazy this year has been. So yeah, if you can share that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I'll tell you guys, personally, this was a complete game changer in my life. I was previously in another career path. I was a humanitarian. I worked in disaster management. I went through a loss of my career and many other things back in like late 2017. And when I started to dive into my astrology, when I found out my soul purpose, a lot of stuff started to make sense why certain things like workplaces, careers weren't working out for me. Because again, the universe will kind of do things to get you back on your path. And when it comes to like your soul's purpose, I'll be completely honest, most of us resist it. It's not what comes comfortable. It's not natural. It makes us stretch and grow in new ways that don't feel necessarily like known to us. Whereas, like I said, the South Node, which I touched on briefly earlier, is again like what we've mastered, what comes naturally to us. Like we have gifts in this area, but again, we've gone through that in the last lifetime. And this lifetime, you're meant to pretty much anchor the complete polar opposite lessons, essentially. So yeah, so we actually, just as a quick like collective talk, we just switched nodes recently in the collective. So that just happened over the last month or so. So now we have the North Node just transitioned into Gemini, and we have the South Node in Sagittarius. So for the last couple of years, we had it in Cancer and Capricorn. So there was a lot of growth happening from the feminine energy standpoint and a lot of the mother wounds over the last couple of years. And then from like a past life karma, which was in Capricorn, we had a lot of lessons around career, father wounds as well, foundation, family dynamics and stuff like that. So if you went through a lot of that in the last 3 years, just know that this was very like collective across the board. And now we're shifting into new themes with Gemini and Sagittarius. But yeah, so essentially the North Node, like this is a very important area I really like to dive in with people because again, most people kind of wonder why sometimes their career is not working out or they feel kind of like lost. I'll be honest, this year, this is probably one of the top questions I've gotten from people of why they've reached out to me in terms of astrology. Mm-hmm. They're lost, they're confused, they don't know their soul purpose, where they're meant to go. And I feel like for myself, when I finally like learned and accepted this information about myself, my whole life changed. It felt like before I was kind of going against the current. Things felt super difficult. It was like having to work harder and not getting like anywhere essentially. And the second I started to anchor in the lessons of my soul purpose, things just started to flow more like fluidly. So this is why I really like stress that people dive into this a lot because it does truly make a difference. So the North Node, exactly like I said earlier, is essentially like your destiny, like what you're meant to do in this life. So I don't know where everyone's level of learning is, but we've reincarnated in many lives. I mean, it's all different for each person, but essentially, like the last life, like I said, the South Node, you would have gone through specific lessons, certain growth, certain purpose, but you've reincarnated in this life to carry out a completely different purpose. And again, this requires you to stretch out of your comfort zone, which is why many times most of us truthfully don't even get to that point in our life because we just kind of tried to deny it. We don't want to do that work. It's uncomfortable. Like, you know what I mean? It's not natural, but your purpose will be activated with your life's mission the second you start to align with your North Node. So this is why it's so important and why a lot of people really do research on this, because once they're able to figure out what they're kind of supposed to focus on, and it's not to say, guys, that the answers are going to be clear cut. Like, again, like we'll know like the sign, the zodiac it's in, we'll know the house, so we'll know a lot of specific themes. And looking at your South Node, we can see a lot of the past life themes for you, but it's not to say that this won't shift over time. And we do hit certain peaks as well when it comes to our nodes because it is cyclical. So it takes 18 years to go through this.
Wow.
Like, 18 years for it to cycle. So that's like quite a long time, right? So think back, guys, like even think to like 18, around that age. Most of us are going off to university or post-secondary and stuff. And you might have seen a flash or a glimpse maybe of your purpose, right? Or at least had some little inklings or some knowing at least. But it's not until you get a little bit older that you start to kind of see more of this kind of come to light for you, which is why most people don't have it figured out right away. This is why you see a lot of people getting more in alignment with their professional career and whatnot at later ages, because based on the certain astrological cycles, you don't really get to that point until much later in life. So this is why, again, it really varies. So I've talked to a few friends where theirs is in certain placements, and that's not going to happen for another 9 to 10 years. So maybe they're working on certain things to get to that point, master certain lessons and growth to get to that point, but they're not necessarily going to get to that until maybe their 40s, right? So it's all very like individual at the end of the day. So just know that if you're wondering like, oh my gosh, I'm this age and like, how come I don't have my life figured out? Like, trust me, there is kind of cycles to astrology, and that's why we need to go through certain growth and periods of growth in order to get closer to that destination. So essentially the South Node, which I was touching on earlier, is a lot about the past life. This is something you've mastered. This is something that comes naturally. Even think in this life, like what are you truly really good at that you never had to question? Like it just came naturally from like the time you were born, like in this life, right? Like, so again, like we tend to want to default to the South Node often, the stuff that comes naturally to us, right? But in this life, we're meant to go in the opposite direction and strive towards what is not natural to us. So again, this is why, again, people wonder why, again, they're not making the strides they make. And it's probably because you're more in alignment with your South Node, which is still important, guys. At the end of the day, you still need to master aspects of your South Node in order to step into that North Node, your soul's purpose. But you cannot be too heavily concentrated on that. So I'll give a personal example based on my own. So I have my South Node in Leo, second house. Leo is very like leadership oriented, like doesn't mind the limelight and all that stuff. I've never been nervous to do lives or even just talk to people. I'm very outgoing. Second house is a lot about like money, income, values, material possessions. So myself personally, I found in this life, I don't want to say I never worked hard, but I, from a very young age, strived well in my career life. Like from 17, 18, 15 even, I was very fortunate when it came to my career. However, that again came as natural to me, but that's not what I'm meant to really go into. So my North Node is Aquarius, which is an air sign, and it's in the 8th house. So Aquarius is very like intuitive, forward thinking, revolutionizer, humanitarian. 8th house is a lot about merging, intimacy, shared finances, inheritances, partnerships. So I'll be honest, guys, I'm someone who's very independent. Don't get me wrong, I like partnering people with Shika and stuff, but I can be a little stuck in my ways of wanting to do stuff my way, which is kind of the Leo stubbornness. But in this life, I'm really meant to come together with people and create a sense of community and merge for a greater purpose, which really has to do a lot about transformation on a deep, deep level, where people are having to go through massive death and rebirth. This is something I've personally gone through my whole life, where I've gone through cyclical every several months death and rebirth, like no joke. So, but that's uncomfortable to me because I don't naturally deal with that stuff well, like death, that stuff really honestly lost, that bugs me. I just have wounds around that. But in this life, that is something I'm supposed to strive towards. So again, it doesn't feel known, it doesn't feel comfortable, but this is the areas we need to stretch into. So again, it will all be based on your unique soul blueprint. But this is an area I just feel it changes the game for so many people, especially if you're working in a career and you don't feel this is what's meant for you. The second we really start to dive deep into those areas specifically, it'll start to make a whole lot more sense why you're naturally good at certain stuff, but you're not necessarily feeling like you're aligned with like your life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that like resonates so much because like for me, like pushing into one direction corporately and then going into this direction, I'm sure you guys have also had that experience. Maybe even this year, you've gotten that realization that you have been spending maybe 10, 15 years in the wrong space, or even going to school for the wrong thing, and now learning that you're meant to go somewhere else. I know Anna had actually a question. Thanks, Anna, for your question. If you guys have any other questions, by the way, you can feel free to put them in the comment section. So she was just saying that what are all the types of signs that we can have? I have heard of zodiac signs, star signs, rising sun and moon. Are these any, or are there any other ones or ones that she can learn about that can help her with astrology?
Yeah, so that's a great question because this is truly foundational knowledge at the end of the day of astrology. So we do have, as I mentioned, I don't know if you caught the beginning of the video, but we talked about all the planets. So these are all important because there's essentially like 12 key areas we look at a birth chart based on the planets, as well as those nodes I mentioned, and that one asteroid, which is Chiron. We also have 12 zodiac signs, which again, this is very important to know because there is certain like traits of each zodiac sign, and based on those planets and where they are, you'll see what kind of traits start to come out in those specific areas of your life. Then we have the houses, which there are also 12 of. So seeing that there's a theme of this numerology as well, by the way. Houses again are the themes. So oftentimes each house is ruled by a planet. By a specific zodiac sign. But this theme is really what's going to help tie together the planet, the zodiac sign, and that theme. It's going to kind of come together. So as you mentioned earlier, like the sun sign, the moon sign, those are all part of those planets we mentioned earlier, as well as the rising sign. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question.
Yeah, I think like Anna, let us know if you have any other questions, and you can always look back to after the live to like freshen up with what we went over. But hopefully that helps with understanding it. And that's good too, because like we mentioned, it's not just like rising sun and moon, there's more to it that we need to learn. And hoping from the live, you guys kind of get a gist of how else can you look at your birth chart or just like more about your journey. One thing that I'm really excited to ask you about is more about the Chiron, like more about the wounded healer. So kind of just explaining like what is Chiron? Why is it your favorite? And like, what can we learn from that specific space of the wounded healer?
Yes. So as I mentioned, guys, the North Node and the South Node and the Chirons are honestly areas I really dive into people with because, again, this has such a huge impact on your soul's journey in this lifetime. I have a lot of people often say, like, why do I tend to go through certain like cyclical wounds? Like it just feels like something constantly gets brought up into my life, like from young age until older age. And a lot of the times I'll tell you guys that this has a lot to do with the Chiron. So Chiron is not a planet like the other things we mentioned earlier. It is an asteroid. However, it has similar properties, if you want to say, to Pluto, which was all about like subconscious, deep transformation, because essentially Chiron is known to be the wounded healer. So wounded healer, what does that mean? So for those of you who are healers, this is obviously going to be very important information to dive into, because you're going to understand why in this soul lifetime you had to go through certain wounds, because you're often meant to heal and transgress and like evolve and expand from those wounds, and oftentimes teach other people based on your own experiences. So I know this was, again, a game changer for me, because I have had certain stuff be very cyclical in my life based on my Chiron, which was in Cancer 12th house, which I recently went through a very 3-year accelerated growth with my core wounds. I'm just getting to the tail end of that now, finally. But really, it started to make sense as to why, again, certain things were so triggering. If you sometimes wonder, like, there wasn't an event that happened to me, there wasn't something that happened, but this just feels so triggering. Again, guys, this often has to do with the Chiron, because this is like almost like subconscious in a sense, based on like your soul. It's like your soul has gone through a lot of these wounds. This will tend to show up in many lifetimes. So if you feel like you're trying to heal something specifically and you're kind of hitting a wall and you're like, why is this so hard for me to heal? Oftentimes this has a lot of like a big connection with Chiron. And oftentimes that also goes back to many lifetimes. So if you feel like you're having a hard time clearing certain wounds, not only is it probably a core wound in this life, it was also a core wound in other lives. And another thing I'll mention is, a lot of the times this is also generational ancestral. So you might have specific family members who also have core wounds in this area. I know my brother and I both had our Chirons in Cancer. So this was something we both had to really go through in the last couple of years. You might have other family members who have that, who are perhaps like older. But again, I really start to go into this area, people, because I feel that the moment we really start to heal this, there is such a shift in your energy. As Shika talks a lot, she's all about shadow work, and I am too, because I'll be honest, this is what changed the game for me, guys. It wasn't about any of the technical things, the manifesting, the action. It really came down to the healing and transmuting a lot of that old energy, the shadows, the like past life work and all that. And again, I really started to get a better idea of that through the Chiron. So this is why I feel this is an area that so many people really, it's worth diving into, because it's going to give a lot of insight in your life in terms of specific things. We only go through the Chiron, we don't go through the Chiron return as much as that nodal return. So I'll let you guys know now. So right now we have Chiron in Aries. If you guys are wondering why there's certain collective themes going on right now, a big one that we're seeing between, I think it was 2017 to 2024 or so, it's in Aries. Aries is the first house, a lot of identity. So in 2017 to 2024, you're probably going to feel like you're going to like really rebirth yourself in many ways on an like identity level. 2, Aries is a cardinal sign. It's also it's ruled by Mars, which is very like masculine, action driven. What we're seeing now unfold in the world, which you guys probably have seen, that we are seeing a shift where we were in such this wounded masculine way of doing things, and our collective is healing a lot of wounds around this. So even if your Chiron, if it's not in that specific sign at the time, we will go through certain like collective healing. So right now, like I said, we're going through that on a collective level. So a lot of masculine wounds being healed. This will continue to happen into 2024. A lot of the structures, the old way of doing things, which is why we're seeing this shift in mentality almost from like hustle to flow. Because again, we're really getting rid of the old paradigms and way of thinking. So again, we have to really look at the sign of what sign it's in. So right now, a lot of people who have their Gemini, so if you have a Gemini, your Chiron Gemini, you are going to go through a period of accelerated growth when it comes to your wounds over these next few years, because we have the North Node in there, meaning North Node, soul purpose, soul's journey. So you're going to see a lot of expansion and growth by working through your wounds in that area, which again, Gemini said is all about communication, how you express yourself. And then based on the specific house and theme, which I could touch on quickly if you guys want me to, that really gives a better idea of how that wound comes up. So just say it's in the 4th house. 4th house is family and home. So if you had a Chiron in Gemini 4th house, that means that there's probably a lot of wounds when it comes to like family dynamics. So maybe there's always just been a lot of conflict in your family and stuff like that. You find yourself like restrict yourself when it comes to expressing yourself. You could have your Chiron in the Gemini 4th house. So again, this is just something really that changes a lot of the game for people, because once you really work through a lot of that, you will see a big shift in your outer world. And not to mention, I said earlier that by working through those wounds, you're often meant to help people to work through similar wounds. So like kind of almost for like you healers out there, spiritual light workers, it's kind of like the niche that you'll end up specializing in a way. So mine was in Cancer 12th house, which was a lot about subconscious wounding around feminine energy, my belief system, which makes sense because growing up, I never felt like I fit in. I felt like even now to this day, I feel like a little bit of the odd egg in my family, even just in terms of my belief systems and who I am. And it's because at a core level, this is a lot of the wounds that I went through and in previous lives in terms of expressing myself and my values. So it makes sense why that's so triggering for me now. But by working through it, I'm able to expand and really transmute a lot of that energy into something powerful to help other people work through similar like lessons. So
That's awesome. I was gonna say, one thing that a lot of people are asking is, how do you find out all this information? And I know you specialize in that. So I guess, like, would they get a birth chart reading? Like, how would they be able to get all this information and kind of know from there?
yeah, so good question. So I there's a couple of different like softwares out there. I personally use one called www.astro.com. We can maybe put it in the notes of the video afterwards. Essentially, though, it's not going to give you all the information we're talking about here. Essentially, it's like a snapshot of a wheel, and there's going to be 12 different houses and this 12 different signs. And then based on that, you're going to see the different placements of all those planets we were mentioning earlier. You can also see a snapshot of the elements, which this is also an area I like to work with people, because if you feel there's a specific chakra or part of your body that just you feel like there's a lot that comes up there, sometimes you just maybe don't have natural energy flow in that area. So I like to look at the earth, air, water, fire breakdown, because it often can be an indicator of what chakras you really need to work on mastering in this life as well. Or again, the past life wounds. If you have a specific one, that might mean there's a lot of past life healing needing to be done in that chakra as well. So essentially, you'll be able to get this snapshot of this picture, but it doesn't interpret the information for you. So you can see it and how it looks and how it's all playing out and how each things kind of correspond with each other. But this is something I work with a lot of my clients, is really diving into their soul blueprint, because I felt that oftentimes the two top questions I get is, what am I meant to do? What is my purpose in this life? That's probably, especially in 2020, the most questions like I've been asked out of anything when it comes to astrology, to be honest. Another, like, again, like career, sometimes even like partners, like, is this partner, are we aligned? So we can even take like your partner's chart and your chart and align them together and see if it's a line match, what you guys are meant to bring out in each other. But essentially, I'll really dissect all the parts of your birth chart, which each of those planets and signs and everything, into like a comprehensive report. So the reason I do that, going back to what Shika said at the beginning, this is a lot of information, guys. When I first really started to dive into this 3.5 years ago, I had a call with an astrologer at the time, and all the things she told me literally went over my head. Like, I maybe remembered a couple things and that was it. And that was like a call and it was done. Like, there was no reference, nothing. And I find, again, as Chica said, it's just a lot of detail, especially if this is something you're new to. It can be a lot to take in. I usually encourage people to go over the report at least 3 times alone, just because, again, you might read it, certain parts might sink in differently or click in. And then again, based on the personal astrology of the world, certain parts of that are going to showcase more depending on the cycles we're working through. So that's why I like to do the report, because then you can reference it. I even have clients like this year. So a year ago, we did their chart, and then they're going through it now. And then they can see certain parts are being aspected differently that they need to now focus on more based on the like collective astrology. So that's why I tend to do it that way. I know some people do calls, which is great, but personally, on my experience, having gone through that and had a call, and then it was like, that's it. Like, good luck. Remember whatever you remember. So
Thank
that's really
you.
why I do this reports for people, because you can
Yeah.
literally look anytime. So
Yeah, I was gonna say I had one done before I met Lauren, and it was the same way you explained. Like it was just one page and a quick little chat, and then I was like walked away still not knowing what my purpose is. I kind of knew what it was, but it was very broad. And what I like about Lauren, the way that she does hers is it's like a good like report. Like it's about 12, 10 pages long.
yeah, at least like
Um,
depends on, again, I use my
yeah.
Twitter for it too as well. And then if certain things are being showcased more like this year for you,
Yeah.
I'll rotate that more. But
It's more
it is like
fun as well. Yeah, you do like a really good job. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely reach out to her. Her Instagram's in the info down below. So please check it out because she just following her, you'll learn a lot about astrology. And yeah, a lot of information. Like we're just doing a little dot of like what astrology is. So there's more that you can learn on a personal level if you do get a birth chart done. So hopefully that answers your question, and also for Anna as well. Different signs, yeah. So like your chart with houses and whatnot, it's different signs. You might have a multitude of signs, just like Lauren mentioned, how like you might be a rising of a Gemini, but your sun sign is a Scorpio. So people might mistaken you for a Gemini. So yeah, there are multiple signs in your chart, and that's where you can deep dive deeper into getting your chart read or whatnot, so you can know what does that sign mean? Why does this sign have to be in this house? And it all depends again on the time that you're born. So it's important to get that information too.
And I'll also mention, so the reason why it's good that Shika mentioned that is because, again, guys, you might have your sun in a certain sign and moon, something. So this isn't the case for everyone, but sometimes. There's a term out in astrology called a stellium. A stellium is essentially when you have a lot of planets and placements concentrated in one specific zodiac or house. So people I work with who have a stellium, even if it's not your sun, even if it's not your moon or any of those top threes, it's still meant that you're meant to anchor in a lot of the lessons and growth of that. So myself personally, I said I was a Libra, but I have a stellium in Capricorn. I have 4 placements in Capricorn, meaning there's a lot of that I have to really master. And it's in the 6th house. So it's not like any surprise to me that I'm an entrepreneur and all of that stuff, because that is, again, very like Capricorn energy as well. But this is an area meant to anchor in and using other parts of my chart to really help people. But I try to also focus on specific houses, because specific houses play a bigger role in your blueprint as well. So the 2nd house, as I mentioned at the beginning, was a lot about like your work, your finances. This is an area we definitely want to look into, because this will have pretty big impact on your career. Even if it isn't your north node, it still has a pretty foundational effect on your life. 8th house, what I touched on earlier as well, also important, because this is where you're going to go through a lot of deep transformation. So also really important. 12th house, that's a lot about like your past life healing, a lot of like subconscious stuff that you're going to have to work through in this life. So again, there's certain houses I really like to focus on more, because it does kind of play a bigger role, as well as 10th house. That's also a lot of the career. And then 4th house, a lot of the family dynamics and stuff as well, which I just feel, again, it helps people a lot. And if you guys want, I can dive into those briefly if that would help you guys, just to have a better idea of what those houses are and whatnot. So
I think we have a few other questions that are coming in. So I'm gonna like let them ask it because it's perfect timing with what you're touching on. Awakened Goddess just asked, where can you go to learn about astrology, and any books that you would recommend for people who want to learn about astrology?
yeah, that's a good question, because I'll be honest, there's only a few books I use. They're very ancient. I'll be honest. I don't even know if some of them are easy to find. I've personally have a lot of friends who are astrologers. So if you guys are interested, I'd be happy to share a couple of their handles. I have, so many of you might know Natalia Benson. She's a pretty big leader in the space of astrology. She's really great for learning a lot about that. Danielle Page is another one that I follow closely. Astrology with Raquel, also really great astrologer, as well as Evelyn Zell. If you guys are familiar with Magic of I, it's like a journal, which actually I would highly recommend if you are looking to get into astrology more and kind of track certain cycles and themes. that is kind of like a planner for astrology. So Evelyn is an astrologer and she personally writes a lot of blog posts for them. So if you subscribe to them, you can read a lot there. But I'll be honest, guys, there's a couple books I use, but they're like ancient. Like I got them gifted to me from people, and I honestly don't know if you'd be able to easily find it, maybe at the library or something. But those are like a lot of the go-tos I go to for that. In terms of websites, I'm trying to think of some good ones. They're not necessarily coming to me offhand. Like the Magic of the Eye, like I said, is a really good one. And those like few people I mentioned, if I think of them, I can always like, we can put them in the notes or something afterwards.
Or you can even share it on your story.
Big individual that I go to for this information, guys. I know that sounds hard to believe, but I just kind of did what my intuition guided me to. And again, my kind of unique soul is just very connected to the astral realm. So sometimes people ask how I know certain things. And I know this might sound bad, but I just channel this information as well. Like it does translate into the astrology, but that's just kind of one of my gifts, that I'm very tied to the collective consciousness, because that's where my wounds are. I said 12th house, subconscious wounds, but I'm very connected to the collective subconscious wounds too. So this is how I'm able to channel the information. If you guys ever want to know like energy updates and stuff, I do stream that as well on my Facebook. You're kind of trying to see like what stuff's coming up, but I'll be honest, there isn't like necessarily a website or anything I use specifically. There's probably some good like beginner ones that I could probably mention, but it's very surface level information, like we kind of touched on with the signs and the planets and stuff like that. So I'm sorry if that didn't really answer your question well, but
I think it's
those people I mentioned are really great astrologers. So I highly
if you can share it maybe on your story or something, people can like go there. And again, like I said, like, because I know Bree just got in late. If you guys did get in late, this will be rerun. So if you want to listen to it tomorrow or like rewatch it, feel free to, because we are covering a lot of like space too. But yeah, it will be up. So don't worry about that. Had another question from D. So what if you have a chart already and you want it to be explained more to you?
Yeah, so I would be happy and honored to do it for you. This is something I do a lot. This is foundational work I actually do with my clients, especially like Shika says, she also works with light workers, healers. I feel like when we unlock specific parts of your chart, you're able to kind of like expand more into your path as a light worker and healer in this space and kind of figure out what you're here meant to do. So that's something I personally do. I actually just opened up spots again recently. I'm very cyclical in nature with this work sometimes, because there's specific times I'm kind of meant to help people with this more, and other times of the year I'm not, because like I said, those 12 houses, we all have them, and different parts of the year you're meant to kind of correspond to different themes of your life. So which is why now I'm in this space of like having to expand and share wisdom and knowledge. So this is a time of year I often like help people work through this. So if you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to do that for you. We can touch base. But yeah, I like to send people examples as well, like of course based on clients like permission, but I've sent examples of other ones just so you guys can kind of get an idea of what type of information it touches on, although it will be unique to you, of course.
That's awesome. Another question we got is, do you use a software for charts or see what's going on with the planets throughout the year?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because I am on this like 24/7. It's funny, but so as I mentioned, there's a couple different ones. I personally use www.astro.com. It's just a personal preference. There's a couple other softwares as well that use it. I am very technical and detail oriented, which is why I like this specific one, how it kind of showcases the information. It's got a chart breaking it down. And then, as I mentioned, it talks about the elements. So those 4 elements. Another thing I can say about that is that I can often see if you're naturally more masculine inclined or feminine inclined also by looking at your chart, because I can see where you might have certain strengths naturally and then weaknesses. And again, where you're meant to do more shadow work, perhaps more on the masculine and feminine side. But this software, so not only does it paint your unique birth chart, we can also look at what's called a progressed chart, meaning, again, as I said, astrology is very cyclical in nature. So you might have only reached a certain point in this soul's journey based on your blueprint and the collective astrology. So I can see kind of what things are coming up for you now your soul blueprint does not change, guys. Once it's set in stone, it's set in stone. Like I said, you do have free will at the end of the day, whether you really want to align with that. But that is like set in stone in this life. Like when your soul came here, this is exactly your unique blueprint. You can't really change that. But in terms of looking at the progressed version, we can see where you've reached a certain point. And then lastly, the transit. So this is, again, very important. When I do the birth charts as well as just readings, I often look at this for people because, again, based on the collective transits, certain soul themes and growth and lessons are going to be coming up for you based on those transits. So that is also something super important to look at because, as I said, I've done clients' charts maybe a year ago, and then they're revisiting it now, and they're going to be going through different themes based on the collective astrology of what's going on, right? So that is why it's really important, honestly, to look at the transits. And this is also how I plan my personal years. So we all have our own personal blueprint. So just because the collective zodiac themes might be one way, yours might not align with that at all. Just because it's in a specific zodiac sign, the house that yours is in, you might be meant to focus on something else, which is why certain times of the year I know are more shadow work based, like intensive months. I know Shika just wrapped up like November. It was a very big shadow work month for her. And based on her astrology, it makes complete sense. There's other times where you're meant to have kind of more fun, parts where you might be more in like family like oriented times. Again, career times. So like as Chica mentioned, if you want to plan a launch, there will be specific points in your blueprint based on the year that would be very aligned for having a launch. Not to say you can't get a launch in other times, but the energy will conspire more in your favor if you do align with this as well. So as I said, for myself, I used to work against the stream for so many years of my life. And the second I was able to really use this tool and information, I was able to align in my life more. I don't experience the same level of resistance like I used to. I used to try so hard and wonder why things were so hard. Second, I really like anchored in with my astrology, I'm able to kind of plan out my years. So that's also something I do. I've done a couple astrocartology, which I know I did for Chica. I've done for a couple people. If you're looking to maybe make a move or travel to a specific place, we can kind of see that as well based on your astrology. Also see past lives. So that might come up as well through your shadow healing and whatnot. So it's probably a lot of information to tell you, but yeah, that's the program I usually use with like my clients and stuff. So
yeah, I loved the one that you did for traveling because, as you guys already know, I love traveling, and I know this year didn't allow it to happen, but it was like interesting because even though I didn't travel, I still ended up doing the work that I had to do being at home. So it makes such a difference knowing, again, just more about your blueprint and your birth chart and just what you're meant to do. And you end up working like with the current, like you mentioned. And it's a life-changing thing. Like imagine like going against the current for 10 years and then you get a birth chart and you're like, oh, well, now all those 10 years I was doing this and I should have been doing that, or I've been working on, my East Node or whatever it may be. That's so important to notify and to know that information. So again, like if you guys can reach out to Lauren, I know a few of you guys are mentioning that you definitely want to connect with her. So do, she's awesome. She'll be really guiding as far as like what is needed for you too, which is one thing that I loved about Lauren is when we connected, how our friendship actually grew was because I connected with her. And I didn't know what I needed to get done. I just knew I needed a reading. And she was very guiding to see like what was best for you and if you needed that, and very intuitive. So definitely reach out if you feel called to. I know Anna just mentioned the app CoStar. I've used it before. Would you recommend CoStar to use?
So yeah, CoStar, as well as I'll mention one of my other apps, The Pattern. Very good apps that are more general based to really, again, simplify this information. Because like I said, guys, astrology is very mathematical and technical at the end of the day. So CoStar, it does talk, it has the 3 signs for you. So it'll show your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. I don't necessarily like to go on the day forecasts. I know they mentioned like specific themes and whatnot. I don't really look at that too much. I'm personally more of a fan of the pattern. It simplifies your birth chart, and like how she could mention how she had like a 1-page report done. Very simplified version of your birth chart. Of course, not going in depth, but you'll learn certain parts again of your strengths, what parts are maybe more weaknesses or things you'll need to work on, healing and whatnot. And you'll see specific themes. So again, based on transits, your soul is meant to go through certain growth and lessons. And also on that app, you can see the collective themes as well. So it does touch on the new moons, the full moons, and then as well things in between. So 2020, one of the themes was unprecedented times, which I mean, we can all say that's pretty much true. So that's one I personally prefer more. CoStar was one I downloaded a while back. It's very entry level. The pattern kind of gives a little bit more in-depth information. You can also put in other people's information so you can see how you're compatible, friendship level, romantic level. And again, if you have certain things you're aligned with or not compatible with and stuff like that. So that's one I would personally recommend that I've personally done, and they're free, both of them. So
that's awesome. Jessica second the pattern being a really good app as well. And as far as like going more in depth, like we mentioned earlier, it'd probably be best to get someone like Lauren to actually go over it with you. Because as much as apps are a great start, it's good for beginners. But when you really want to get a more specific like answer, like what's your soul purpose, or what are your wounded, things that you have to go through for shadow work, that's where having an astrologer can be very helpful. So hopefully, like I said, if you feel called to and you feel like you want to, definitely connect with Lauren, because she does a really good job giving that report, which is awesome. I do want to end with like blueprints, because I know you mentioned about that a lot. So just sharing more about like the purpose of a blueprint and how important it is for our soul. I talked about it in our past episode on the difference between soul and the body and other aspects of our being. So how does the blueprint, I guess, kind of like guide us through our soul purpose and what we're meant to do in this lifetime?
Yes, I like it because I really like to use this term. I'll be honest, guys. I do use like birth chart, of course, as that's the technical term, but I'm a lot more aligned with saying soul blueprint, because again, your soul incarnated in this life with a specific purpose, certain wounds to heal through, but based on your blueprint, there's going to be certain parts of you that have certain strengths, certain weaknesses, certain ways that you're going to communicate, certain like relationships that you're going to be more drawn to. So having a more comprehensive idea of your blueprint, again, as I said, if you have a lot of concentration in certain areas, that means this is very foundational for your work. So even if it isn't your sun sign, your soul purpose, your wounds, if you have just say a lot in the 10th house, that's career. That means in this life, you are definitely meant to master career. So again, having an idea of your blueprint really helps to see like what areas of the focuses of your life is going to be really important in this life. And then again, as I touched on earlier, using that blueprint to really align your year. So I myself personally, I kind of plan out my years in advance a lot based on my astrology, because before, again, you can set goals and everything like that, that's fine. But I know that specific times of year, I'm known to do shadow work a lot more. Certain times of the year might be more favorable for travel or career. So again, using that blueprint to align into specific areas of your life is just going to make things so much more fluid, because again, we're just from an energetic level, like energetic wise, if you know that you're in Pisces and just say you have it in your moon. So you have a moon in Pisces and we're in Pisces season. That probably means that in Pisces season, you're probably going to go through a lot of emotional healing in whatever house that corresponds to. So again, knowing this information about your blueprint really helps you to really design a lifestyle that works for your soul to help, like I said, work through certain healing, heal certain wounds, but again, expand into specific areas, because again, certain parts you'll be meant to master more than others, and other parts might require a little bit more work. So having that blueprint, you really start to see, okay, this is like a strength of mine. I need to anchor that. Okay, this is a weakness. So A, I might need to work on this. B, I might need to collaborate with people who perhaps have this as a gift or a strength. Again, too, even with relationships, like you'll see again, okay, I'm a certain way, but I'm going to want a partner that complements me, but also essentially kind of makes up for what I lack in. Again, you can look at that based on your soul blueprint. So not too sure if that kind of answers it really well, but again, like I try to use this to plan out the years, each kind of zodiac season, month, whatever you want to call it. I do yearly readings for people sometimes as well based on that. And it does help people to kind of plan out their years a little bit. So if you're kind of trying to see like what things are going to come up ahead of time for you, that's kind of a good thing you can work with as well. The other thing I'll touch on too with the blueprint. So based on the report I do send people, that obviously has a lot of the information, but don't think that stops there, because again, that is a lot of information to take in this short time. So we always follow up on a call afterwards. So really important to give people an opportunity to soak this in, because for many people, this is very like beginner and new to them. So it's a lot to absorb in a short span. So in order to integrate and embody it, this is why I like to dive on a call with people afterwards. If you have specific questions, things that you maybe need some clarity on, or just want to dive into a little bit more and like talk it out. Because sometimes, again, I feel like talking through things can like help sink it in a little bit more versus just reading something. So that is something I also do. And I personally actually work with a lot of entrepreneurs. They might not be an astrologer or anything like that, but again, we use their astrology to really, again, find out their niche, focus on what their purpose is, what wounds they need to heal, but also map out their years. So again, like we talked about, this time of year might be a good time of year for you to launch based on your astrology, you know, and again, based on the collective astrology too, what themes are going to come up for you. So especially now as we're ending 2020 and transitioning into 2021, which is the age of air. So there's a lot of themes about Aquarius coming up, but then there's certain themes also coming up in other areas collectively. So this is all important to intertwine into like the bigger picture.
Nice. That's awesome. And I think also like one thing to consider too is like, because I know Anna asked, can you know from your birth chart exactly what your soul purpose is? And that's the beauty of like having an astrologer that can also incorporate your gifts. And I always say that with every healer or, you know, light worker in the space is, you know, you follow what you're meant to do, but then you also have your gifts that you can tap into. And Lauren, her gifts are very intuitive. She has psychic abilities as well. So she does give that in and she'll channel that through to share you like what to expect in the next few months. And she's pretty on point with it. So if that's something, again, that you're interested in, you really, really want to know exactly what your career is or where you're meant to go, or if you are going towards your soul, you know, your wounds or what your purpose is in this lifetime, that's where you can get someone who can deep dive and make it easier for you to comprehend, because again, it's just such a vast space to learn about. And like even Lauren herself, she says like it was overwhelming and it can be overwhelming. So that's where, you know, if you really want to look into that, definitely get a specialist that can, and one that you can connect with. And like I said, reach out to Anna, to Laura and Anna if you would like to learn more about that. So yeah, that was super, super awesome. I know we just like scraped the surface of like astrology and everything. I hope we get to do another live again, because I feel like there's more that we can talk about that can help a lot of people. And I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Let me know if you guys are wanting to learn more. Anna says, I'm interested. Definitely message Lauren. Her Instagram is in the box down below. So it's Low with Love. So you can go check that out, and she'll be more than happy to chat with you. You can send her a DM on details on how to get your birth chart and get a reading if you're interested in that. And she can guide you through that. And yeah, I don't know if you have any last like pointers or things that you'd like to share for the end of this year, because it has been quite a big year for people that you feel called to share. But I'd love for you to end on that note.
Yeah, for sure. Like there is obviously a lot of big themes for 2020. Myself personally, I kind of knew going into this year a lot of what to expect, especially because I'm born Saturn in Capricorn, which was what we just left, that period of 3 or so years. I had a lot of like good inklings about what kind of foundational shifts we were working through as a collective. So I'll let you guys know going forward. Big changes we're going to continue to see over these next 4 years, especially, is a lot when it comes to the material world, foundation. So there is going to be an uprising in political systems, healthcare systems, even like Mother Earth, to be honest, and natural disasters, corporations, pharmaceutical companies. A lot of the old paradigms, guys, is being broken down. And this is, again, part of the revolution that we're about to start going into the age of Aquarius. So that is something, like, don't be a little bit intimidated when you see a lot of this start to be dismantled, because again, we go through collective themes. It is cyclical. Sometimes it's more frequent. Sometimes it's hundreds of years. It really depends on so many factors at the end of the day. But I will say wholeheartedly that 2020 was meant to be a year of massive soul expansion. It's no coincidence that we saw so many people go through soul, like, spiritual awakenings this year, because that was really the intention around 2020. It was really a pivoting point of, like I said, what we're moving into going into the next 2 to 4 years. It was also a 4-year. So again, I do tie a little bit of the numerology into the astrology as well, but 4 was a lot to do with the heart. So again, a lot of big expansion happening with Mother Gaia energy, the feminine energy, as well as our heart chakra. So if you feel like you went through a lot of heartbreak, a lot of healing in the heart space, know, again, this was collective in nature. And again, we go through specific themes collectively. So even though you have your own blueprint, collectively, we will work through certain themes as well. We also have Mars and Aries, which that will be shifting out in early January. So if you feel, again, there's been a lot of anger surfacing for you maybe over the last, so since mid-September, again, this is something we're seeing. We go through, again, these cyclical patterns because healing shows up in different ways, guys. Just because we cry does not mean that that's the only form of healing. We need to experience all of the various emotions in order to actually transmute energy, which is very important for your healing to know that, especially if you're an empath. We tend to by default feel sadness and grief and all that stuff, but it's equally important to feel anger and other things in order to actually transmute and purge energy. So we have on Monday, great conjunction. This has like been a very talked about theme. First time in 800 years it's aligned this way. So we have Saturn moving into Aquarius. So again, a lot of the themes we're going to see is a lot about technology, innovation, humanitarian collectiveness. Like, it's not going to be about I anymore. It's going to be about we. So this is obviously very exciting for the collective, that we're going to see more people like merging together. Like Chica's created this community. Again, having communities come together with a specific intention and purpose to help to raise the collective consciousness. And then as well, Jupiter is also moving into Aquarius as well. So that will be a big theme that we will see showcase in the next couple of years. And as I touched on at the beginning, a big theme as well is a lot of expansion in the communication realm. So a lot of talking more about your authentic truth, speaking your truth. There's no coincidence, guys, that we're seeing this uprising take place of people finally taking a stand when it comes to specific causes, right? Like Black Lives Matter, vaccines, all these things. This is only a hint of what's to come in the next couple of years as well. So I can honestly talk about those themes forever, but that just gives you a small glimpse into some of the collective themes we're seeing based on astrology currently.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing with us the themes, because I think it's perfect timing with us being in this winter solace theme and the conjunction that's coming up as well. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I know we sent a lot of information your way, but again, this will be posted online. So if you feel called to rewatch it, maybe write some notes on it and research on what your notes are, or even have a session with Lauren, feel free to. Like I said, her information is in the description box down below. It's at Low with Love, and feel free to just message her on Instagram. And then if you guys can also give this video a thumbs up and let us know that you liked it, and share it with friends, like and subscribe, that would be amazing. And I guess our last conscious breakthrough will be the full moon. So you guys know I do full moon sessions, so you'll have our last one on the 29th of this month. So I hope to see you guys there. But thanks, Lauren, again for coming. It's been great doing a collaboration with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited I was able to share this information with you guys. If you guys have feedback, or if you can put comments in this video, if you want us to do another video perhaps in the future, talk about specific themes or topics, like, we would love to hear from you, because at the end of the day, we want to share more of what you want to learn, right? So this is information I've learned to master, but again, everyone's at different points of the journey and different levels of knowledge. So if you're able to give us feedback, or again, share topics maybe that you want to learn about more when it comes to astrology, let us know. So
Awesome. Yay. Great. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you later. And thanks for joining us on the live. Bye.
Bye.